It was a typical evening, the kind where everything feels like it's going just right. I was standing in front of my mirror fixing my hair like I do every night before bed, but tonight, something felt off. Maybe it was the way my reflection stared back at me like it was waiting for something to happen. I shook my head, trying to shake the feeling, but it wouldn't leave. I had everything anyone could want: nice apartment, good job, friends who cared. But something inside me just felt empty, like I was pretending to be someone I wasn't, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep the act going. I grabbed my phone off the dresser, half-heartedly scrolling through social media. My feed was full of happy faces, vacation photos, people living their best lives, but it was all starting to look like a show, one big, happy illusion. I clicked on an old post of mine, one from when everything seemed perfect. That girl on the screen, she didn't know what was coming. Maybe tomorrow, I whispered to myself, but tomorrow never really comes, does it? Growing up in Atlanta, I was always the one who could make people laugh. Even when things were tough at home, I put on a smile and kept moving. My mom always told me, "You got a gift, girl, use it," so I did. It's what got me through school, through the jobs, through all the hard stuff that came my way. I made a name for myself in the advertising world. I was good at it, great, even. My boss thought I was the future of the company. And maybe I was. I had all the right connections, a solid resume, and a way of making everyone feel like they mattered. But there was one thing nobody ever saw behind the scenes: the cracks. I was living in a high-rise apartment now, in a part of town that screamed success. And yet the more I climbed, the more I realized how lonely it was at the top. I didn't know it then, but I was only a few steps away from losing everything I had worked for. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I met up with an old friend, Mia. We hadn't hung out in ages, and it felt good to be around someone who didn't know my perfect life. We grabbed coffee, sat in silence for a while, just watching people go by. Mia turned to me, her eyes full of concern. "You good, girl? You don't seem like yourself." I laughed it off like I always do. "I'm good, just tired," but she wasn't buying it. "No, seriously, you don't have to be perfect all the time, you know." Those words hit me harder than I expected. I mean, she wasn't wrong. But I had built this life around being perfect, being the person everyone could count on, the one who had it all together. If that facade cracked, what was left? The next few days were a blur. I spent my time juggling emails, calls, and project deadlines, all while the pressure inside me built up like a ticking time bomb. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in someone else's life. Every morning, I'd put on my best face, makeup, polished clothes, a smile so bright it could blind you, but inside I was exhausted. My phone buzzed on my desk, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from James, my boyfriend of 2 years. He was great, supportive, sweet, always there when I needed him. But lately, I couldn't help but feel like we were drifting. His texts had become more routine, less personal. He was busy with his career just like I was, but the silence between us was deafening. "James, hey babe, how was your day? Want to grab dinner tonight?" It was the same message I'd gotten a dozen times this week. It was like we were just going through the motions, checking boxes on a list of things we were supposed to do. I wondered if he felt the same emptiness I did. I texted him back, keeping it simple. "Sounds good. I'll be home at 7. But even as I hit send, I knew something was off. That night, we ate dinner in silence. He scrolled through his phone while I picked at my food, pretending everything was fine. We hadn't had a real conversation in what felt like weeks, and it felt like we were living separate lives under the same roof. "Have you been okay?" I asked, breaking the silence. James looked up from his phone, his brow furrowed. "Yeah, why wouldn't I be?" I shrugged, not knowing how to explain the emptiness I felt, let alone the strain in our relationship. "I don't know, I just feel like we're both kinda stuck in a routine." He set his phone down, but instead of offering comfort, he sighed. "Look, it's been a tough couple of weeks for both of us. You're busy, I'm busy, we'll figure it out." But that was the thing, we weren't figuring anything out. I wasn't sure if it was because we were too busy or because we didn't care enough to put in the effort anymore. I thought about Mia's words about not having to be perfect all the time, and they echoed in my mind. Maybe she was right, maybe I didn't have to keep pretending everything was fine. That night, after James had fallen asleep, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from my boss asking for a last-minute pitch for a new client. I groaned, already knowing I had no energy to give it my all. The email was a reminder of something I had been trying to ignore, the weight of the life I'd built. I was losing myself. I kept telling myself I'd just push through like I always did, but deep down I knew that wasn't the answer. At some point, I'd have to face what was really going on beneath the surface. But was I ready to do that? Could I really take the mask off, or would I crumble without it? The days that followed felt like I was living in a fog. I kept my head down at work, pushing through deadlines like a robot on autopilot. Every smile felt like a lie, every conversation a performance. And the emptiness inside me grew louder, more insistent. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in the break room at work, mindlessly stirring my coffee when my coworker Tiffany plopped down beside me. Tiffany was the type of person who could make friends with a brick wall, always bubbly, always chirpy. She wasn't blind to the changes in me, though. "Girl, you good? You've been off lately." She gave me a sideways glance, leaning in a little too close for comfort. I forced a smile, trying to brush it off. "Yeah, just tired, you know how it is." She didn't buy it. "Tired? Nah, I know that look." "You're drowning, aren't you?" I froze, her words hitting me harder than I expected. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk, it was just that I didn't know how to explain myself without sounding like a failure. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," I finally admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Tiffany raised an eyebrow, clearly shocked. "Wait, what do you mean you're the boss around here? You're always on top of things." I shook my head, slumping into the chair. "I thought I was, but it's all starting to feel fake, like I'm playing a role I'm not sure who I am anymore." She studied me for a moment, her face softening. "You gotta let it out, girl. This job, this life, it's all just stuff. You can't keep pretending to be perfect, especially when it's breaking you down inside." I sighed, staring into my coffee cup. "I don't know how to stop pretending." Tiffany leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "You don't have to figure it all out today, but start small, let someone in. I don't know if it's James or your friends or me, but you gotta stop carrying all of that weight alone." Her words lingered with me long after she left. Let someone in. I had been so focused on making sure everything looked perfect from the outside that I hadn't even thought about what I was doing to myself inside. I knew Tiffany was right. I couldn't keep this act going forever. But I also couldn't shake the fear that if I let the walls come down, I wouldn't be able to rebuild them. And if I lost everything I had worked so hard for, the job, the apartment, the life, it would mean I had nothing left. That night, I lay in bed next to James, the space between us feeling wider than ever. His steady breathing next to me should have been comforting, but it only reminded me of how far apart we had become. I rolled over, my phone lighting up with a notification. It was an email from my boss again, this time with another huge project that needed my attention. I stared at the email, my heart sinking. I knew what I had to do, but I wasn't ready. As I put the phone down, I realized I had two choices: keep pretending I had everything under control, or finally admit that I was losing myself. Neither option felt easy, but I couldn't keep running from it, not anymore. The next morning, the weight of everything that had been building up hit me all at once. I woke up feeling like I was drowning, like the air in the room was too thick to breathe. The usual morning routine of getting dressed, making coffee, checking emails, it all felt like a chore, a performance I had to get through before I could face the world. I dragged myself out of bed, still tired from not sleeping the night before. My mind kept replaying Tiffany's words, "Let someone in." But how could I be vulnerable when it felt like I had built my whole life around being strong, around being the one everyone could rely on? When I finally made it to work, I was running late, but that wasn't new. I didn't even bother trying to make myself look perfect, just the bare minimum. My coworkers barely noticed. They were too busy with their own tasks, just like I had been before. As I walked past the conference room, I overheard a conversation between my boss and another executive. They were talking about the big project I'd been assigned to, how I was the only one they trusted to get it done. I could feel my stomach drop. They had no idea I was barely holding it together. The pressure was suffocating. I wasn't just feeling the weight of the project, I was feeling the weight of everyone's expectations. I had created this image of myself as the reliable, perfect worker, and now I was trapped in it. If I failed, I didn't know who I'd be anymore. At lunch, I stepped outside for a quick breather. The air was thick with humidity, typical for Atlanta in the summer. I sat on a bench, staring at the bustling city around me. It all seemed so far away, like I was watching it from a distance. A few minutes into my thoughts, my phone buzzed again. This time it was James. I hesitated before opening his message. "James, hey, I've been thinking. Maybe we should take a weekend trip, just you and me, get away from everything." I stared at the message, my chest tightening. On the surface, it sounded like a good idea, but I knew deep down it was just a band-aid for a much bigger wound. We weren't okay, and no amount of time away would change that. We weren't even talking about the real issues. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I sat there, letting the noise of the world around me drown out the thoughts in my head. It wasn't until my phone buzzed again, this time from Tiffany, that I snapped out of it. "Tiffany, you coming to the happy hour tonight? You need a break, girl, it'll help." For a second, I considered ignoring it. I didn't feel like being around people, didn't feel like pretending to be happy. But I knew Tiffany was right. If I didn't let someone in soon, I might just snap. I typed a quick reply, surprising myself with how easy it was to say yes. Yeah, I'll be there. As the day dragged on, I kept thinking about what I was doing to myself. I was so focused on keeping up appearances, on making sure everything looked perfect to the outside world, that I had lost sight of what truly mattered. What was the point of climbing this ladder if I was just going to fall off at the top? When work finally ended, I got in my car and drove to the bar where Tiffany had suggested. The lights were dim and the place was packed with people unwinding after a long day. I spotted Tiffany immediately, waving me over with a grin on her face. She looked like the same carefree, happy-go-lucky person I had known for years. As I sat down, she didn't waste any time. "So, what's really going on with you, girl?" I smiled weakly, but the truth was I didn't know how to answer her. The cracks were getting harder to hide, and for the first time I didn't want to. I took a deep breath. "I don't think I know who I am anymore. I'm just tired of pretending." Tiffany didn't say anything at first. She just looked at me, nodding slowly. "It's okay to not have it all together. You don't have to be perfect, you know. You're allowed to fall apart." Those words hit me harder than I thought they would. For the first time in a long while, I felt like someone understood, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel so alone. The next few days were a blur of emotion I hadn't known how to handle. After Tiffany's words, I felt something inside me begin to shift. It wasn't a big shift, not yet, but it was there, quietly urging me to stop pretending. To stop hiding behind this perfect image I'd worked so hard to build. But old habits die hard. The world still expected me to be that woman who had it all together. At work, my inbox was full of demands, and I was already behind on the latest project. Every time I opened a new email, a fresh wave of anxiety hit me. I was juggling too many things at once, and I could feel the weight of it in my bones, but now I couldn't ignore the cracks anymore. They were too loud, too glaring. The pressure was mounting, and the fear that I was about to lose everything was becoming overwhelming. James and I were still in the same routine, barely speaking outside of casual greetings. I knew he was trying, he always tried, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were strangers living in the same apartment. One night, after another awkward dinner, he sat across from me, trying to make conversation. "So, how was your day?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual warmth. I swallowed hard, trying to force a smile. "Busy. You know, the usual." He nodded, but there was a tension in the air now, a heaviness that hadn't been there before. We were both scared to say the words that were building up between us, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to say something. "James, we need to talk," I said, my voice trembling slightly. He looked at me, confusion clouding his expression. "Talk about what?" "About everything," I said, feeling the weight of the words even as I spoke them. "About us, about what's been happening. I feel like we're just going through the motions, like we're not really living." He looked at me for a long time, as if trying to process what I was saying. Finally, he exhaled deeply, leaning back in his chair. "I know things haven't been the same, I've noticed it too, but I just don't know how to fix it. It's like we're stuck and I don't know how to get us out of this." I felt my heart sink. This wasn't a conversation I was ready for, but I had to have it. "I don't think we can fix it just by pretending it's fine. We've both been running on autopilot for too long. I'm losing myself, James. And I can't keep pretending like everything's perfect." The silence between us stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he stood up, pacing around the room. What do you mean, losing yourself? You have everything, Nia. You've got the career, the apartment, the life everyone else wants. What's missing? I stared at him, feeling the sting of his words. That's just it, James. It looks perfect from the outside, but it's not real. I'm not real anymore. And neither are we. The words hit harder than I expected, and I could see the hurt in his eyes. He didn't get it, not completely. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I was the only one drowning. He was too. We were both stuck in a cycle of pretending. That night, I went to bed feeling exhausted, but it wasn't just physical exhaustion anymore. It was the kind that comes from constantly holding up a facade, from trying to be everything to everyone and forgetting who you are in the process. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know what the future held for me, for James, or for the life I had built. But I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I needed to find myself again. Even if it meant letting go of everything I thought I wanted. The next few days felt like a slow, uncomfortable unraveling. It wasn't just the conversations with James that had me feeling off. It was everything: the weight of pretending to be someone I wasn't, the constant pressure to be perfect, to have it all together. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was sinking deeper, and the harder I tried to stay afloat, the faster I was pulled under. At work, I found myself avoiding meetings, putting off the emails I didn't want to answer, and generally feeling more disconnected with every passing hour. I couldn't focus on the details anymore because my mind kept drifting to the same question. Who am I really? I had always prided myself on being strong, on being the one people could count on. But somewhere along the way, that strength had turned into a mask. I was hiding behind the life I had built, terrified that if I let anyone see the real me, I would lose everything. But everything had already started slipping away. One evening, after a particularly rough day at the office, I decided to take a walk. I didn't know where I was going, but I needed to clear my head. As I walked through the streets of Atlanta, the city felt strangely quiet, even though it was bustling with people. I found a small park and sat on one of the benches, staring up at the dark sky. The weight of the world seemed to settle on my chest. Everything felt so heavy. I was carrying a burden that wasn't even mine to carry. I had put so much effort into making everyone think I was fine, but I wasn't. And I was starting to realize that pretending to be okay was slowly suffocating me. I pulled out my phone and opened the Messages app. There were texts from James, from Tiffany, from my coworkers. But none of them felt like they were asking how I really was. They were all just noise. I scrolled down until I found a message from Mia. It was from a few weeks ago, before everything had started to fall apart. Mia, you good? Haven't heard from you in a minute. I stared at the message, feeling the tears threaten to spill. I hadn't talked to Mia in weeks, and it wasn't because I didn't want to. It was because I had been so wrapped up in this image of myself that I didn't have time for real connections anymore. I quickly typed out a response. Me. Not really. I feel like I'm losing myself, Mia. I don't know how to fix it. I hit send before I could overthink it. The response came almost immediately. Mia, girl, you don't have to fix it, but you do have to face it. You can't keep running from this. Whatever's going on, you need to let it out. Let it out. Those words echoed in my mind. Maybe Mia was right. Maybe I had spent so long trying to keep everything inside that it was destroying me. Maybe the only way to truly fix what was broken was to finally face it, no matter how terrifying it might be. I stood up from the bench, wiping my eyes, and began walking back to my apartment. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was moving towards something real. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew I had to stop running from myself. That night, I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, but I didn't feel the same weight pressing down on me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel so alone. Maybe, just maybe, I was ready to face what I had been running from. The days after that night felt different. It wasn't an immediate fix. It wasn't as though everything clicked into place right away, but something inside me started to shift. I stopped running from the feeling of being lost. Instead of pretending to have it all together, I began to take small steps toward rediscovering myself. I started talking to James about everything, the things I was feeling, the distance between us, the weight of pretending to be okay. It wasn't easy. He didn't have all the answers, and neither did I, but for the first time in a long time, we were having real conversations, not just surface-level exchanges. One evening, after a long talk, James took my hand, and for the first time in ages, it felt like we were seeing each other, truly seeing each other. We didn't have to have all the answers, but we were finally honest. And that felt like a start. At work, things didn't magically change either. I wasn't suddenly the perfect employee and the deadlines didn't stop coming. But I began to set boundaries, learning that it was okay to say no, okay to ask for help, and okay to not be perfect all the time. I leaned on Tiffany and Mia more, not just for support, but for the kind of friendship I'd been neglecting. The most important thing I learned, though, was that it's okay to not have everything figured out. It's okay to fall apart. In fact, sometimes falling apart is exactly what needs to happen so that you can put yourself back together in a way that's real. One afternoon, as I was walking through the city, I stopped at a small cafe, the kind of place I would have never had time to visit before. I sat by the window, sipping my coffee, watching the world go by, and I realized something. I was finally, for the first time in a long time, at peace with myself. The perfect life I had once strived for, the life where everything was in control, where I never showed weakness, wasn't what I wanted anymore. I wanted real, messy, imperfect moments. I wanted to embrace the unknown, even if it meant facing the fear of not knowing what came next. And that was okay. It's easy to get lost in the hustle, to forget who you are beneath the pressure of expectations and the need to be perfect. But it's okay to fall apart, to admit that you don't have it all together. Life isn't about being perfect. It's about being real, and sometimes the hardest part is letting go of the image you've built and accepting the truth of who you are. So, if you're feeling lost, stuck, or like you're running on empty, remember, it's okay. Take a step back, breathe, and start being real with yourself. You don't have to have all the answers right now, just take it one moment at a time. If this story spoke to you, don't be afraid to reach out to someone you trust. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to say, I'm not okay, but it's the first step toward finding yourself again. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. If you've been struggling with the pressure of pretending to be perfect, share your story with someone who cares. Don't carry that weight alone. And if you've found peace in embracing your imperfections, remember, you're not alone in that either. Stay connected, keep being real, and keep moving forward, one step at a time.